Welcome everyone to the first conversation. This is the Dr. J Talks podcast series. My name is Mike Johnson. I've been a college professor of sociology for over 20 years. And one of the things I like to do is pride myself on the study of society, how it changes over the years and how we can all adapt to that as it impacts our lives. And, you know, one of the things is during each generation, we have these major cultural shifts, and that's happened throughout society, whether it's going from farms to the industrial era, then to the information age, and now the information era, right? And now I feel like we're really at another major shift where we're in this social media era. It's always been around for a while now, right? Maybe almost 15 years, social media, but now it's really where more and more we're living our lives through that. So this podcast, the purpose of it is to help us all navigate. You know, I can remember a time when, hey, there was a whole different world. There was a whole different set of values. There's a whole different set of creeds. Professionally, there was a different path to get to your career goals. But as we have these societal changes, all of these rules change and need to be updated to adapt for that new time. So the idea of this podcast is to have guests from various walks of life, various areas, teachers, local comedians, again, sports officials, police officers, right? And to talk to all these people and not just learn about them and what they do, but how has what they do and how they have to approach what they do changed over time. And so I'm glad to introduce my first guest. This gentleman is a scholastic teacher and a sports official. And so we have that in common to kick off this interview series. Over the past year, through sports officiating, we've gotten to meet one another and click and collaborate on a lot of things locally. And so without further ado, and we're going to get right into it, my guest is Bruce Kilmoyer. So Bruce, thanks for coming on. How are you?
Thank you. Very good. Thank you.
All right. We're going to jump right into it. We just spent some time before this conversation, before we hit record, catching up to speed and some of the things that we're doing. So we know you're a scholastic teacher. So give the folks a little background. What grades have you taught? What school districts? How long have you been teaching? What subjects? Tell us about yourself and in your teaching career.
Okay. Well, right out of high school, I went to Millersville University to get my teaching degree in social studies. Mm-hmm. And after I redshirted my first year, after 5 years in school, because I was an English major and I changed to social studies. So after 5 years there, I graduated, and I was fortunate enough to get my first teaching job up in a little town in northern PA, the Troy. There's a lot of Pennsylvania above Williamsport before you get to New York.
Right.
So that was my first teaching year in 1996, the 96-97 school year. So I spent 4 years in northern PA, small school. So I had the opportunity to teach anywhere from 7th to 12th grade. And I'd say with the exception of anthropology, I taught every one of the social studies: history, geography, sociology, psychology. So while I was teaching up there, I was coming down in the summers working on my master's degree at Millersville. And of course, being a sports official, I read the sports section before I read anything else. So I'm driving back from Lancaster and I stop for lunch and I pick up the Lancaster newspaper. This is 2000 now, after 4 years up there. And I see the Mannheim Central baseball coach retired. And later on in the article, it says he was also a 8th grade social studies teacher. So in the year 2000, I was fortunate enough to apply for, and I moved back down and I got a job teaching at Mannheim Central, 8th grade down here in Lancaster County. And I spent the next 12 years teaching 8th and then 9th grade social studies. Now, a little bit larger school district, so I was just teaching history classes, which is my wheelhouse. And I was working on my master's degree, and I got my master's degree in sports management, athletic administration. So I applied for an AD job. Looking back, I think I lost my mind a little bit, but I got a athletic director job in the West Shore School District at Red Land High School. So I spent 4 years as a high school athletic director, still in education, out of the classroom, but a different role. And after 4 years, I thought to myself, I really missed the classroom, because I might see a kid walking down the hall, and all I know about him is he's on the JV baseball team, or
Right.
she plays field hockey. And when I was in the classroom, I thought, I know 10 different things about each one of my students. So in the summer of 2015, I resigned from that position, and I was fortunate enough to get a teaching job, 8th grade social studies in Red Lion down in York County.
Right.
So when if you add it all up, I'm going into my 27th year of teaching, about 22 of them in the classroom, 4 of them as a pseudo administrator. And I've
Gotcha.
been all over the state, but right now I teach 8th grade social studies in Red Lion down in York County. When I was at Manheim Central, I did teach, it was 20th century US history. That was the 9th grade required course. I really enjoyed that. The course I teach now is kind of the beginning of American history, right before the Revolutionary War to the time period Reconstruction, right after the Civil War, which is
Gotcha.
probably my second favorite class to teach. Now, my father was a social studies teacher for 36 years, retired. But when I got into junior high, 7th and 8th grade, I had a lot of good role models who were teachers. I can remember some of my favorite English teachers, some of my favorite social studies teachers. Those were probably my 2 favorite subjects, English and social studies. And it continued when I got to high school. And I saw the impact that these people were having on my life and the impact that they were having on numerous other students' lives. So when I went to Millersville, I went with no major, and I went 2 years like that. And then I thought to myself, well, I want to get into education to be one of these role models. And I thought to myself, I don't want to be just like my father, which looking back, I probably should have realized I did. So I went as an English education with a history minor. And then I'm like, I love my minor classes way better than the major. So I flip-flopped. I graduated with a social studies degree with a concentration in history and an English minor.
You know, it's funny you say that. And when you talk to teachers, that's kind of the typical path, right? Somebody and one of their teachers inspired them, right? And I'll even say teaching at the collegiate level, that's what it was for me, admiring these teachers and this knowledge and the way they would package it. That sparked an interest. Now, I didn't ever think to get into teaching per se, but for me, that inspiration happened more so at the college level, looking at my professors. And then sure enough, even though it's not my full-time job, teaching, that's what led me into teaching at the college level. My thing, I was always a little scared of doing it at the scholastic level and dealing with some of the behavioral issues and all that. And at the college level, at least they're more adult and you don't have to deal with that element. It brings us other issues, but you know, not that kind of the high school element. What are some of the biggest ways that from when you started and what you're required to do and have to do has changed to how you have to approach and do your job and what you're required to do for your job now?
Well, right off the bat, technology. Probably there was as much technology change in my first 15 years as there's been in my last 2 years. And, you know, with our advancing very often technology, that's been a big game changer, game influencer, you know, making my job easier and at the same time a little more difficult. Because instead of getting a phone message that a parent would call me or to talk or whatever, you know, there's an email at 9:07 in the morning. And, you know, if I don't respond by 10:15, even though I might be teaching the whole time, you know, I might, get a follow-up email. So technology has been a huge positive change. Again, for that communication, for student information, a student who, wants to present in a different way, then, we don't get up and stand up in front of the classroom maybe as much as we used to. So technology has been a huge change. I'd say I'm right in the middle. I have colleagues they're constantly on the cutting edge of everything, and their digital skills toolbox is overflowing. I tried to pick out things that I thought were going to be important and useful for me and really gain the knowledge for those things. Keeping it my online digital grade book, having my classroom management system up to date and for easy access. And I see it just like you said. I have colleagues who are still a little slow in the process, and I can see how they struggle. So I'm kind of right in the middle. And I was fortunate. I had a principal and then a department lead person who maybe once a month we would meet and, what's one new thing you can try? And if there's 8 people in the social studies department, maybe 5 people shared something they're trying. And I might be like, okay, there's 1 or 2 things there that I don't know about that I'm going to try out.
Right.
And junior high, middle school is a little unique. Grade point averages don't count for college applications yet. So we have the luxury, especially in social studies, which isn't a state required testing subject, we can try things out. If I want to use some sort of new review gaming or some sort of new presentation method, just to see how it works. Sometimes things go great. Sometimes they kind of fall flat. Just go with the flow a little bit.
Have you seen those mandates increase over time for more accountability and outcomes driven? Or has it loosened up, or have you seen a wave? Have you seen it come and go?
Well, I think the first big push was with President Bush in the early 2000s and the No Child Left Behind initiatives. And that really started, and that's 22, 23 years ago. That kind of really started things. And now, there is the accountability. Test results from students are, published in the York newspapers where I am. And part of teacher evaluation is based upon how the school does overall. It's a small part. It's not the majority of a teacher evaluation, but, I might not be able to help too much in math and science, but in social studies, we do a lot of writing. We do a lot of interpreting, whether it's the Declaration or the Articles of Confederation, and tie that into the language arts aspect of the state testing. So it's more so at the state level than the federal, but there is much more accountability than I saw 10, 20 years ago when I started, especially in the middle, late 90s. March 13th, 2020, we were in school and my students were doing presentations and we leave that day. So I don't know if you remember, there was going to be like the two week shutdown. We'll see how things are in 2 weeks. And that turned into, I didn't see was teaching 8th graders. I didn't see those 8th graders again the rest of the school year. We weren't in school for a single day after that day. Now, going back to that, I was super fortunate. I had a student teacher that year. And the funny thing is, in Pennsylvania, you're required to do student teaching to become a teacher, but no teacher is required to take or have a student teacher. And I had never had one. And I'd always been a little hesitant to give up that classroom control. So my principal came to me in the fall, would you like a student teacher? I'm like, okay. And I lucked out. She was outstanding. She went to Penn State Harrisburg. She won like social studies student teacher of the year. So when we went virtual, she was very technologically advanced, kind of like yourself, Mike, very much so. So we had to post 3 assignments. You could put them all out on Monday. You could put them out Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and that was it. There was no live. There was no Google Meet. There was nothing like that. And I know there was a lot of teachers that really impacted them. They didn't see their students' faces at all. Now, in Pennsylvania, in New York, I should say, in Red Lion, we went back the next year. We were in the classroom to start the fall of 2020. Students could take virtual days. They didn't have to come to school at all. Teachers needed to post the lesson, the assignments. I would put about 5-minute screencast, what we were doing that day, every day. So if a student was absent, they were still expected to do the assignments. And I know that was a struggle. That year, I guess those students will be going into 11th grade now. I think those students struggled the most because we were still, unsure of how the school year was going to go. So attendance was down. Students could come a couple days a week and be home a few days a week if they wanted to. So I think we lost a lot of connections with students that year. And I know that was tough on teachers as well, because everybody was masked up. Students stayed in one classroom all day. The only time they left that room was to go get their lunch or to go to gym class. Teachers rotated to these pods that we had set up. The desks were spaced out in the classrooms. It was a difficult teaching year. And I think that's the year, the first year back was the year that a lot of teachers thought, if this is what education is going to be like, maybe I look for another job.
Right. And so did you, all the reports nationwide that there's this exodus, is that what you saw locally in the profession?
At my school, it wasn't so much. There were teachers that went to other teaching jobs, but I didn't see teachers go to other careers as much as I had read or seen nationally. So we were fortunate that way. Well, that's an outstanding question, Mike. So maybe the first third of the school year, one of the presentations by my social studies department chair was about artificial intelligence. And I think back then it was just ChatGPT. Google's bought some of the other ones which were developing, they weren't out yet. So he showed us examples. Write a 12-sentence essay about Abe Lincoln at an 8th grade level. A second later, there you have 12 sentences written as an 8th grader about Abe Lincoln. So you got to embrace it. You talked before about how things have changed. The only thing that's going to be constant in just about anything is change. Some of the things we've done, some teachers, if you have to write an essay for English, you write it with paper and pencil. Also, our school has gotten this technology where if students are signed into the school Wi-Fi, which to use their school device, they have to be. So I can see the screens of every student in my class. And I can see what their history as well. Oh, okay, now you're on my Google Classroom assignment about writing this Abe Lincoln essay, but you were just on ChatGPT. You can use that technology to limit them to one website. So for that essay, students can just go on Google Classroom. But I will add, I can go online and I can type in, create a 5-question multiple choice quiz about the Oregon Trail at an 8th grade level or a 6th grade level or a 12th grade level. And 5 seconds later, there it is for me as the teacher. This is a benefit as well.
How at the scholastic level is social media dealt with? And I'm sure over the years, it took a while to even figure it out. So like, how are students' accounts monitored? Are they monitored? How can they be? Do they have people specifically there to monitor it? But are there specific protocols that maybe you have to sign up for that you can't do in the social media space? What are the teacher specific responsibility with the whole cyberbullying thing? You're going to have some issues behavior-wise in the classroom that didn't start on the school grounds. It started online. So that's a loaded question, but let's just talk about that for a minute before you go into the officiating piece.
Okay, the first part about students, the school I teach at, and I think probably most other schools, we have an acceptable use of technology form that students and their parents fill out. Now, do they read it? Do they know all of the school board policies? Probably not. But that's the first piece that we do at the beginning of the school year. We go over that, and they turn that form in. Within my classroom, teachers kind of have the freedom. How are students going to use their device? Do a Survey Monkey real quick on your cell phone. But most of our technology use, at least in my school, each student gets a Chromebook when they enter 7th grade. So they keep that 7th and 8th grade. So they have the computer to use in class. Phone use during class time, during structured class time, is pretty limited. And I think that's constant. But again, each teacher can kind of make their classroom policy about that. In terms of monitoring, in my class last year, there was a Supreme Court case about a student. She didn't make the varsity cheerleading squad, and she didn't start on the softball team. And on a Saturday, she posted some inappropriate stuff about that situation when she was a ninth grader. And got to the Supreme Court, and they just decided she was okay. So my students, when we were learning about the Bill of Rights, we actually looked at that little video clip. And, I go over with them. If you do things in school, or you post things that are going to be disruptive or cause a problem in school, you're going to get into trouble. And that's in our acceptable use technology. If you're going to online bully, or you're going to make a statement that just causes discussions or problems within school, that's unacceptable. But if you post, hey, Mr. Kilmoyer shows too many ed puzzles, I might not like it. It might be true, but that's not causing a problem. But if there are situations that, if it comes to me as a teacher, I need to take that to my building administrator. I need to make them aware of that. And then typically looking at the severity of it, that's up to the dean of students, the assistant principal, the building principal, if that rises to the level of something that's going to be a problem in school.
So is it monitored though, or is it kind of like, okay, it's out there, and if it comes up and gets to our attention, then it gets dealt with?
That's exactly what it is. There's no one who monitors student private Snapchat, Twitter. I don't know how many kids use Twitter anymore, TikTok. But as I found, 7th and 8th grade students will screenshot everything. So if there's something that's inappropriately posted, but it's only 7 seconds, there are probably quite a few people who have an image of that. So you think, oh, I'm going to send you a Snapchat for 7 seconds. It's going to be a lot more than 7. And that's what that girl, and I forget what school district she was in. It might have been Mahanoy area. She sent a Snapchat, but there was a screenshot taken of it. And, she lost at the lower levels, but the Supreme Court said, nope, what she did wasn't going to cause a disruption in school. I have an Instagram account that I use for myself, and I have one that's, Mr. Kilmoyer RL. So I'll post things about school. I won't use student names, and I'll typically try to take student working pictures where it might just be showing what they're working on. So it's not going to show faces, or it might show kind of from behind, or, there's 10,000 emojis. Maybe I put the smiling face emoji over all the student faces, but typically I don't post pictures of students, even though it's my teacher Instagram account. But I will try to post often, showing, it's a communication piece. Parents can follow it, students can follow it, anybody can follow it to see what we're doing in school, because I think we do a good job in my school. So there are people that should be able to see what we're doing. Oh, geez, I might have to jump in my time machine. When I started teaching, I think there was a little more camaraderie. Like, I would go in the cafeteria to eat lunch, and there might be 20 teachers eating together, just shooting the breeze about anything except school. So if I could change, I'd say that if we could get a little more collegiality, some camaraderie. Not that there isn't, or pockets of it, but I think there's some teachers that I probably don't see for 5-6 days at a time in my building, just because they're in different areas, and we don't meet as often as we used to.
So I appreciate that. So, man, you educated me on a lot, and that's what this platform is for. And I'm hoping to do and have these interviews and conversations really with people from all walks of society about how things have changed, where they're at now, and a glimpse into where they're going, because we're all navigating these changing waters in whatever we decide to do in our personal life or professional life. So I want to switch gears here to officiating, something that brought us together. Give us the background on your sports officiating.
Well, let me go back before I became a PIAA official. When I was in 10th grade, I'm on the JV basketball team here at Lebanon. And typically we would have practice Saturday mornings, either 8 to 9:30 or 9 to 10:30. My father was a PIAA official. He did football, basketball, boys and girls, and baseball. So on Saturdays at 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock, he went into the YMCA and he took myself and my best friend, and he told these are 8 and 9-year-old basketball players. We'll ref the 1 o'clock and the 2 o'clock basketball games. No pay, just we're going to come in. So as a 10th grader, my buddy Brad would ref with my dad. These are 6-minute quarters. Again, these are 8 and 9-year-olds. And then I would ref the second game. We wore gray sweatpants and a gray t-shirt, and we had a black whistle. So that was my first officiating experience on the floor. I had grown up with it. From little on up, I remember going to watch my dad umpire, usually in the summer. So when I graduated high school as a freshman at Millersville, so I'm 18 years old, I'm a high school graduate, I go and I take the basketball test. And you had to go to a school. They offered it like 3 times a year. No rule book with you. You had to take it paper and pencil. Again, technology making things easier. I think that's something good that the PIAA is doing. You can take the test anytime. So freshman year in college, I come home for the winter, middle of December to the middle of January, I did basketball. So when I graduated college, then I took the football test, 1994. So I was doing basketball and football. And that's when I got my first teaching job. So I moved to another part of the state, and ADs were assigning games then up there still. So an AD might say, oh, John Smith, I know you. Here's all the varsity JV games. Just fill them up for us. So I was fortunate that I got to know some people, and I was able to work at games. And then when I moved back in 2000, I took the softball test. So there was a brief time period when, just like my father, I was doing football, basketball, and softball at the high school level. Probably about 2005, I looked into getting into college football. From 2008 to 2011, I didn't do any more basketball. I needed a break. I did high school football, I did college football, and then I did softball at that time period. The 4 years I was an athletic director, I didn't do anything. So I stopped doing college football. If you go inactive more than 1 or 2 years, you got to take the test. So I had a 4-year break from sports officiating. So when I got back into the classroom, you got to take the test again. I took the football test, and I took the basketball test, and I took the softball test. So right now, currently, I just do high school football. I do high school softball. And then for the last 4 years, I've been doing college softball. A little bit at the Division I level, mostly the Division II and Division III levels. I would probably have to say football. And I've had the ability to work different positions on the field, but there's nothing like stepping on that grass on a Friday night, being in the background. You know, the game is the show. The kids are there. That's what people want to see. My job, our job, is for that game to get played and people not even to realize we're there. That's when I feel I do my best job. Yeah. Whether it's as a referee, whether it's as a line judge, wherever I'm working on the field. The game's over. People saw the game. It was a good game, and nobody knew we were there. Yeah. Now, I will follow up your question. The hardest things I've ever officiated, basketball. Basketball is far and away. And when I started at the varsity level, boys and girls varsity only used 2 officials. Now they've transitioned to 3, just because it is so fast and intense. But officiating basketball and then working really good pitchers as a plate umpire, whether it's baseball or softball. Now, being a football referee, the white hat, you got to know your stuff. But yeah, basketball and working the plate in a really good, when those, did she paint the corner with that pitch, or was it just outside?
Let me circle back to the beginning of your career. Did you catch the bug?
I did.
In that YMCA, doing with the gray shirts, you caught the bug right away.
I did. And, having a unique background, I've had the chance I was never a varsity head coach, but in my teaching career, I've had the chance to coach junior high basketball or JV softball or be a varsity assistant baseball coach while I was also an official. So the bug was always either blatantly up front or always in the background. And people are like, well, why don't you want to keep coaching? Well, that I got that officiating bug, and I'm okay at it. I think I do a decent job. And, I had a great example, my father or other officials that I got to see work. Just like I had great teachers. I had some really good mentor football, basketball, softball officials that helped me get better. I don't know if I had it as a 15-year-old 10th grader. I was a little nervous. And I can remember some of those games that I officiated while I was in college, some of those basketball games. It's more nerves. Don't screw up. Don't screw up.
Yeah.
But once you know the nuance, once you're comfortable, I've always had the bug. As a coach, there was nothing like seeing the hard work of a team pay off. Whether it's, I only coached basketball at the junior high level, but there were teams where we would lose by 15 or 20 the first time, and maybe lose by less or have a win the second time. So that progression of seeing a team work together under my guidance, there's nothing like that. But
Gotcha.
As a coach, there are things that are out of my control, and I see it a lot now, and I saw it a lot as an athletic director. There's 5 guys on the bench during a basketball game. One guy, the best player on the team, looking into the stands. What other guidance is he or she getting, not from the coach? Who are they looking to? That's something that I see more nowadays. So coaches, it's hard to control everything. As an official, and I know whether it's a football crew of 5 or 7 or softball umpires, there's either one partner or maybe it's a 3 person crew. I have more control over my doings. It's my strike for the next 7 innings. That's my strike zone. If I screw up, that's on me. So I do like the officiating, because I think I can, if I'm doing a good job, I think I can be the one who's in control of that. As a football referee, there's 4 other people on my crew. If we have a good pregame and everybody's on the same page, I think that's going to reflect positively on the crew. So what do I like? I officiate now, and I don't coach anymore. So I'd say the officiating is what I really have embraced more than the coaching.
Do you have any war stories?
Well, to answer that first, I've been very, very fortunate, and in my 30 plus years of officiating, I don't have any like war stories. Sure, I've walked off of fields or courts and you're terrible, you suck, what were you watching, you missed a great game, go back to Foot Locker with your striped shirt or whatever it might have been. But I've never had anyone come up to me or follow me to a car, anything like that. But as a society as a whole, that's kind of the point we're to. And I know Pennsylvania has some very specific officials harassment laws.
Right.
So it is unfortunate. I think everyone, especially fans, have a vested interest. And when things go against their best interest, we need someone to blame for the loss.
What's the misperception of officials that irks you the most?
It's us against them. And is that 100% the misconception by 100% of the people? Absolutely not. I kind of look at myself as a stage director, not the director who kind of runs the show. I just make sure all the props, all the pieces are in place. The game, that's the show. That's what I'm here to work with. And it's us all working together. You're playing the game. You're working your tail off to be the best football player, best softball player you can be. I want coaches and players to know I'm doing the same thing. I just don't show up on a Friday night not reading the rules, not watching video. A good friend of mine is he's a head coach here in Lebanon County. He has had me come out the last 2 seasons just to go over new rules. But he says more than that, just to kind of talk to his kids, for them to see me as an official, not in my black and white striped shirt. And we'll go in the locker room between what their two-a-days. They just throw out questions. And sometimes these kids will make up the craziest questions. So if I tackle somebody by their long hair, am I going to get a 50? No, that's not. No. So it's us all working together. I heard this quote from a softball coach: the game doesn't know who's going to win. So there might be a football game that we have on a Friday night, and it's this 6-0 team versus this 1-5 team, but we show up to officiate the same way we would show up to any other game. The game is the show. And that 1-5 team might play their best game. I'm there to officiate that the same way that you are, to the same way we would officiate any other game. Well, I think the PIAA has started this to get in touch with high school athletes early, to get them into officiating. You know just as well as I do, the average age of sports officials gets older every year, and the number of sports officials gets less every year. So there are some student athletes, who graduate maybe not as a 19, 20-year-old, but maybe as a 25-year-old. They're not going to get into coaching, or they're looking for, a fun, exciting, part-time hobby. I wish we could somehow get in touch with those younger individuals. And I'm not saying you have to be a star in your sport to be a good official. I was a star in none of the sports I played in high school, and I think I'm doing okay. So the PIAA has that new program where, as a 17, 18-year-old still in high school, you can, work sub varsity or junior high games. I think that's a good start. But I'd like to see older officials, try to actively recruit other officials, because, 10, 12, you never know how many years you have left to officiate. There's going to be even less officials if we don't resupply the numbers.
What does it look like in 5-10 years?
That's the $64,000 question. You hope that 20-something, 30-something people who, instead of, I always tell people, you want to holler about the strike zone, you go right online. You can take the test in my living room this afternoon with an open rule book and become a PIAA official. I think, again, with the junior officials program and the ability to take the test any day, anytime online, I think the PIAA is being proactive, but it's tough to predict the future in anything. So I guess we'll see year by year.
Right. Hey, I want to wrap this up. I first want to thank you, Bruce, for being the first guest on the Dr. J Talks podcast here.
Mike, thank you for having me.